Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much to Senator Cardin and Senator Mikulski for joining me. We have a cause, the three of us and a few others today, that we want to make clear to you and to the American people. And we are also delighted to have the one, at least in my view, the four of us standing here, the one who has the most credibility on a topic of significant importance to our country, but certainly to Judy Gross's family. And so 3 years ago, Judy's husband, 3 years ago today, Alan Gross, was arrested in Havana, Cuba. He was there working for USAID, a subcontractor for USAID, and he was helping a small, peaceful Jewish community in Cuba. And he was doing the type of work that he has done in his entire professional career, helping people. Yet he was arrested and he was detained, a 14-month detainment. He was then charged by the government of Cuba with actions against independence or the integrity of the state. A 2-day trial resulted in a 15-year prison sentence. Since his arrest, great concern about his health. It has deteriorated. He's lost more than 100 pounds. He has a mass on his shoulder. His family members have experienced a significant and serious illness in his absence. And in light of his continued detainment, his imprisonment, 41 of my colleagues joined me and Senator Cardin and Senator Mikulski earlier this year in calling on the Cuban government to release Alan on humanitarian grounds and allow him to return to his family here in the United States. Despite that call by a large number of United States senators, Alan is still in prison today. Yesterday, we have introduced on this anniversary of Alan's arrest a bipartisan resolution in the Senate calling for Alan's immediate and unconditional release. We expect this resolution to pass this week. The Senate being the Senate, senators are viewing it, but we are unaware of any objections that will be raised. And it's a message to Cuba that the United States Senate, the American people that we represent, want Alan Gross to come home. Alan and his family have suffered tremendously over a long period of time, and it's well past the time that Judy is reunited with her husband. I'm interested in the topic of Cuba over a long period of time. In July of 2000, I offered an amendment on the House floor that for the first time passed by overwhelming majorities, a majority of Republicans, a majority of Democrats, said it was time to change our policy with Cuba in regard to the embargo. And so I'm one who, since July of 2000, have been engaged in trying to create greater opportunities for American agriculture, farmers and ranchers to deal with Cuba and to have the opportunity to sell our products. And since that time, since 2000, I've worked with many of my colleagues trying to continue the effort to change the regulations and the law that would further engage Cuba and the United States. And I say that in hopes that I, as someone who has been on the side of further engagement, will get Cuba's attention, that those of us who believe that further engagement is in the best interest of both of our countries, at least for me, I'm no longer willing to pursue this further engagement until Alan Gross is released. I took a hiatus from this year of offering my normal amendment to the Appropriations Bill in the Appropriations Committee. In my view, United States Senate, we don't get enough done. We don't get as much done as we should, but we certainly have the opportunity to highlight. We ought to use our positions in a responsible way to bring attention to the plight of those who are in harm's way, whose lives have been dramatically affected by the bad decision of others. And so it's an honor for me to be here with my two colleagues in this effort to bring attention to and ultimately to bring Alan Gross to the United States. Let me introduce and ask to come to the microphone my colleague, Senator Mikulski.
I think that.
All right. Oh, you did? I think it changed on me.
Mr. Castro, a message from the United States Senate. Let
Alan Gross go. Let him go today. Let him go now. Let him come back to the country that will welcome him back and in the arms of his loving wife, Judy, who has fought so hard to bring him back to us. Mr. Castro, you are illegally holding him on a trumped-up charge against his own will, to the devastation of his health, and to your devastation in the standing of the world. I am proud to join on a bipartisan basis with my colleagues to offer a resolution that I hope will unanimously pass the Senate that says, let Alan Gross go. He has done no one any harm. He is not a threat to the national security of Cuba, and he is in dire need of medical attention and the love of his own family. I'm proud to stand with Judy, who is a tireless, unrelenting, persistent voice for the liberation of her own husband. Now, Castro might talk about the liberation of the poor and the marginalized and dispossessed. He's been talking about that for 50 years. If he wants to deal with liberation, liberate Alan Gross. The story has been told. We know it. 3 years ago, there was Alan working, a brother social worker that I admired, out there trying to bring the internet primarily to the Jewish residents in Cuba so that they would have access to information and to a free world. What was so threatening about that? Wow, access to freedom, access to information. No wonder they grabbed him and scooped him up. But this man did nothing wrong. The Cuban government knew what he was doing, and they found it unacceptable. Well, we find it unacceptable that he's been held there for 3 years. Even at the time, as his own health has deteriorated, as his own mother had cancer, as his own daughter had health challenges, as his wife faced surgery, they wouldn't even let him go. We have worked hard on this with Judy. She has been just an outstanding advocate for her husband. And I put you right up there with Mrs. Sharansky. And your voice will be heard through the ages, that if you don't stand up for the people you love, then who are you going to stand up for? But we love the fact that our countryman is that we have the right in the Senate to call for this man's release. We've worked on a bipartisan basis. I'm going to thank Senator Moran and others who've worked so tirelessly on this. People like Senator Durbin, who've also actually visited him in prison. We've reached out within our own colleagues in government to other embassies, even to papal authorities themselves, to raise this on an international agenda, because this is a great humanitarian cause. I will be voting today for this, but no matter how, and I believe the vote will pass, but we need to be tireless. And Mr. Castro, if you want to improve your standing in the world, you can do it this afternoon. Let Alan Gross just go and let him come back to America. Thank you.
Well, let me thank Senator Moran for his leadership on this issue and on so many issues that affect basic human rights. This resolution, I'm very optimistic, will pass the Senate. It's another statement of what expectations are in regards to Cuba's actions with Alan Gross. I also want to thank Senator Mikulski for her leadership on this issue, getting other entities involved in Alan Gross's injustice, and we thank her for that. She mentioned Senator Durbin, who took the leadership to visit in Cuba to raise the Alan Gross issue. I also want to acknowledge Congressman Van Hollen's role in the House in leadership on behalf of Alan Gross. So there's a large number of us who really underscore the point that Senator Moran has made. And that is, we are all looking forward to a better relationship between Cuba and the United States. That's in our interest, it's in Cuba's interest. The detention of Alan Gross stands in the way of that improvement. And that's a fact. And we all hope that Cuba would do the right thing. The facts surrounding Alan Gross's arrest is well known. He attempted to help a small Jewish community get access to the internet. That's the facts. It took Cuba 14 months to determine whether they would try him, detaining him for 14 months. And then a trial that had no standing as far as legitimacy took place. So my colleagues are correct. Alan Gross should not be detained in the first place. He did not violate any basic law that would dictate that type of punishment. But we don't even have to go there. Cuba should release Alan Gross on humanitarian reasons. The health issues are also well known. The loss of weight, what he's gone through, the mental anguish, etc. We also know the health risks of his family here in the United States. This is not a close call on humanitarian issues. It's also not a close call on the legal issues of his detention. 3 years, way too long, way too long. Cuba needs to do the right thing, and that is release Alan Gross now. No preconditions, no excuses, just do what is right. And I tell you, we've all been encouraged in this effort because of Judy Gross. She's an extraordinarily strong woman who's not only stood by her husband, stood by justice and what is the right thing to do. She has organized, I think, the sensitivity of the international community to the plight of her husband, Alan Gross, and we're pleased that she's with us today, and we thank you for your courage, and we want you to know we're going to stand with you until we see Alan Gross return to the United States.
Judy, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cardin, Senator Mikulski, Senator Moran. I think I have to go to Kansas now. I've never been there.
You'd be welcome.
Okay. So thank you for having this press conference and for your tireless and ongoing support of my husband, Alan, and his freedom. Your support and that of others feed my spirit. They sustain me just when I think that I can't go on any longer. More importantly, even though so distant, these events and outpourings of support mean more to Alan than you can realize. Held in an 8 by 10 foot cell, he pores over the pictures and the letters and the stories of all of these events over and over again. These warm his soul and let him know that he is not forgotten. For those of you who don't know Alan, let me just say a few words about him. Above all, he is a humanitarian. He has worked in over 50 countries and territories, mostly in emerging world markets. His work has always been focused on helping people in these places find ways to improve their lives. For example, he worked with sheep farmers in the West Bank to help improve their profits. He worked in Africa to assist young entrepreneurs to privatize their businesses. In all instances, Alan is blind to the politics of the countries in which he's worked, just as he was in Cuba. In Cuba, Alan was doing what he loved, working with the Jewish community, and in this case, simply helping them to improve their communications between 3 spread out small communities on the island. Yesterday marks the 3-year anniversary of Alan's wrongful incarceration. He is frail. He has lost over 105 pounds, suffers from chronic pain, and still does not know whether or not he has cancer. Alan's U.S. doctors insist that a more precise and thorough testing must be done to get an accurate diagnosis. We have made numerous requests to the government of Cuba for Alan to be seen by an independent doctor to get a second opinion. These requests have fallen on deaf ears. I don't understand this response. What does the Cuban government have to hide if their diagnosis is correct? Allowing another examination would be the humanitarian thing to do. I also must note that just last week we learned that Alan's 90-year-old mother is no longer responding to the medication for her lung cancer, and she will have to start the regular chemotherapy. Alan has begged the Cuban government to let him see her on humanitarian gestures. He is absolutely distraught that he might not see her before she dies. And she says to me every week, I fear that I'll never see my son alive again. So, how do we get Alan home? One thing I know for certain, we must start with a clean slate. What has happened or not happened between our government and Cuban's government is over. It is the past, and neither country should dwell on it. Both countries must stop the accusations and begin legitimate talks. The rhetoric of which country said what is simply foolish and must be put aside. Negotiation is defined as the reaching of an agreement through discussion and compromise. The operative word here is compromise. This does not mean that when one walks away from the table after hearing something that is not acceptable. It means having dialogue over and over until an agreement is reached. It means give and take. It means not stopping until Alan is once again back on U.S. soil. President Castro, releasing Alan on humanitarian grounds would send a signal to the U.S. government that Cuba wants to improve bilateral relations. President Obama, now that the elections are over, I urge you to take up Alan's case and make it a top priority. I urge high-level talks between the White House and the Cuban government. The U.S. government must have an open and honest dialogue with the Cubans and do whatever it takes to secure his release. The U.S. government sent Alan to Cuba, and it is therefore the duty of the U.S. government to bring him home. Just 2 months ago, I visited Alan in Cuba, and he told me that he feels that his own government has forgotten him. In his words, I feel dumped by my own government and left here to die. President Obama, it's time to bring my husband home. Thank you.
Judy, thank you very much. Thank you for your loyalty to your husband and for speaking out, helping us make the cause. We'd be glad to respond to a couple of questions. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Rebecca with FAB Services. Two-part question. The State Department again said yesterday that the government, the U.S. government, is committed to bringing him back home, that they continue to press him to the government, that he is not abandoned, that they'll continue to press him to his release. And then just last night, a story came out that Peter Cordu from the National Security Archive met with Alan Gross last week. And reportedly, he said that one of the first steps to get his release is for the U.S. to sign a non-aggression pact with Cuba to get the process going. And what are your thoughts on both those things?
Judy, anything you want to say?
I think I'm going to refer that to my attorney. That's all right?
Hi, my name is Jared Genser, for anyone who needs it, Jaredgenser. No, I would just say, look, Alan's top priority, and I do think that this was misreported, his top priority is his freedom from prison in Cuba. There are obviously a whole range of agreements and disagreements, both within and between political parties about what to do about U.S.-Cuba relations. Not surprisingly, Alan has a number of those opinions himself. But I can assure you, speaking to Alan on a weekly basis as I do, his top priority is his own freedom, and everything else comes secondary to that.
And again, it is incumbent upon the administration to, in my view, this is a call for Castro. This is not so much about the United States as it is about the Cuban government releasing somebody who is detained inappropriately, illegally, as well as was indicated earlier, should be released on humanitarian grounds. What conversations go on in the larger picture about U.S.-Cuban relations, certainly something that this Congress will have dialogue about, but certainly something that the administration will be responsible for leading.
You just have one more question, please.
Yes, ma'am.
Senator Cardin said that the fact that Alan Gross is in jail is an obstacle to better relations with Cuba. Now, the thing that by freeing him, the Congress would be willing or would be ready or is prepared already to do something toward normalizing the relations with Cuba at this point?
Well, we've seen over a long period of time, as I indicated in my remarks, since I engaged in this issue in the year of 2000, we've seen the movement toward the sale of agriculture commodities, food, and medicine. So there's been that opening. You've seen an administration that has changed remuneration and visa issues. And so my point would be that there is little likelihood of additional kinds of changes in that relationship as long as Alan Gross is held hostage.